What is going on, everybody? Welcome back. Happy New Year's Eve. Hope everyone enjoys the holiday tonight. Make sure you drive safe. Uber if you're drinking. Take care of yourselves and the people around you tonight. Anyway, welcome to the postseason power rankings. And this is going to be a bit of a special episode. Obviously, we've been doing the power rankings throughout the season on a week-to-week basis, showing the movement from week to week. Well, today as we sit here in the postseason, we're actually going to look at the movement on the season, and it's going to be a little bit more of a where I was right, where I was wrong. Don't want to bore you with too much of that, though. It's also going to be a little bit of an outlook moving forward. Obviously, playoffs are ahead of us, but I just did my playoff predictions video. You guys kind of know what I think happens in the playoffs, but more so for the 20 other teams that aren't in the playoffs. A lot of coach movement. You know, what can we expect a little bit for these teams moving forward? So this is going to be a fun one. Make sure you hit that like button if you enjoy this video or if you've enjoyed my power rankings throughout the season. And also make sure you check out that promo code ThatFranchiseGuy on SeatGeek if you're shopping for tickets, where you can save $20 on the best prices. All right, so at number 32, a bit of a surprise here, and this is kind of me just kind of wanting to make a statement, but I also think this is currently the worst team in the NFL if there was a Week 18, and that is the Carolina Panthers. Dropping down 15 spots from where we started. I wasn't particularly high on this team. I didn't expect Cam Newton to really come in and be too healthy, but I had to have them a little higher just in case he was. Obviously, didn't work out there. So heading into this offseason, they don't have a coach. They don't know what their quarterback situation is going to look like. And this defense, like I had said in the preseason and throughout the season, I think is vastly overrated. You got Luke Kuechly, who's a stud, but he's going to be 30 years old. I don't love this pass rush. Brian Burns could take that next step up, but I don't love the secondary either. So this team has a lot of work to do. Would not be surprised if we were talking about them drafting Trevor Lawrence with the first overall pick next season. Number 31, the Cincinnati Bengals, going to be picking first in this year's draft. You know, I was somewhat high on them. That was before the Jonah Williams injury. That was before the A.J. Green injury. I think if those guys were out there, if Andy Dalton played the whole year, I really do think they would have come in closer to the 24 spot or wherever I had them. But yeah, they're going to be an interesting team next year. I think getting those two players we just mentioned back next year on top of a new quarterback and having the first pick in every round, which is an underrated element. Their second round pick is almost the equivalent of a first round pick. So a good draft could make this team a bounce back candidate next year. I mean, the 49ers might win the Super Bowl this year. They had the number 2 pick in last year's draft. So I wouldn't completely rule out a bounce back season for the Bengals next year. But Zach Taylor, we don't know if he's a good coach or not. Number 30, the New York Giants. Nailed this one. Just the Dave Gettleman factor here. A team that wants to run the ball, stop the run, and then have a bad secondary, a rookie quarterback, and really that's it. It's just not going to work out in 2019. I think firing Pat Shurmur was actually a mistake. I know he's not the best coach out there, but the fact that they're standing by Dave Gettleman and firing their coach, I mean, this offense wasn't bad with Pat Shurmur. And now Daniel Jones is going to have to learn a completely different offense this year. Now, they could upgrade a head coach. We'll see. That's hard to say, but definitely not, I think, the best move for the Giants. I think, if anything, you had to fire both Gettleman and Pat Shurmur and clean house. Number 29, the Detroit Lions. Quarterback injuries never going to make it easy on a team's season. Defense just didn't take that next step up. I didn't love this pass rush coming into the year, and it was a big reason this defense struggled this year. Now, they had a lot of injuries this year, so the -10, not really a big whiff by me. I didn't expect a whole lot from the Lions. I'd say they actually, if anything, in the first 4 weeks of the season, when they were healthy, were overperforming. Number 28, the Washington Redskins, coming in right around where everyone expected. They definitely still showed some of that scrappiness that I liked in the preseason. Now, I will say, would not be surprised, depending on what happens this offseason, if this team came in a lot higher in my preseason power rankings when we get into deep dive season. I love the Ron Rivera hiring. That is basically official at this point. This team, I've always thought, if they have a strength, it is the scrappiness of their defense. I just think they play tough and physical and are never an easy out, and they showed that down the stretch with an interim coach. Now, Ron Rivera is a great coach to inspire that culture. They're going to have the number 2 pick in the draft. Might be Chase Young to get an elite pass rusher in there. And then you get Reuben Foster back as well. We could be talking about the Redskins as one of the top defenses in the NFL next year. It really would not surprise me at all. Number 27, the Jacksonville Jaguars absolutely nailed this one. No movement here. Didn't think Nick Foles would work out, and he definitely didn't. Didn't think the defense would take any dramatic improvements up. And here we are, number 27. Number 26, the Cleveland Browns. They're going to come down 11 spots. I mean, it was a train wreck season. Even the people that were the lowest on the Browns probably had them around the 20 spot. I mean, the roster talent here was incredible, and Baker Mayfield looked really nice coming out of his rookie year. Baker did not look good in year 2, and basically everything fell apart. They did fire Freddie Kitchens, as I've been saying, so we'll see how their coaching situation plays out. As for the minus 11 here, maybe I did buy into the hype a little bit too much. I think I was about average on this team as far as the hype went, and everything kind of went wrong here. Number 25, the Miami Dolphins, who are going to climb up 7 spots. Now, when the season started, they were very clearly the number 32 team, so that was, in hindsight, a good ranking still. I think Brian Flores deserves a ton of credit for the job he did with this team. Ryan Fitzpatrick deserves a lot of credit. It is my opinion that this team should not draft a quarterback. For one, as I sit here today, this could obviously change as we head into draft season. I think this quarterback class is a little overrated. On top of that, you have Ryan Fitzpatrick here, who did a pretty good job here. You've got Josh Rosen, who, if you can beef up this offensive line, you're looking at an offense that's actually pretty capable around a young quarterback in Josh Rosen, who they've talked up a little bit. So a lot of credit to Brian Flores. I did say in my deep dive, despite ranking them 32nd, that I really appreciated the direction that this team was going, because they fully embraced the fact that they are not going to be a good football team. They traded away veterans. They didn't overspend in free agency. They're working towards clearing up a ton of cap space, accumulating draft picks, and to really turn around the culture here. I give this just staff a ton of credit, and the players for a good season in Miami, that I would be really excited for the future of this organization, especially as the Patriots are kind of, the Tom Brady era is starting to look like that's winding down. Number 24, the New York Jets. So no movement here. When I ranked him 24, I acknowledged the talent. I've always been a Sam Darnold believer, but the Jets, the factor of them being the New York Jets really scared me, and that definitely played out. They had a pretty sloppy season. Obviously, the mono for Sam Darnold to kick off the season hurt this team a lot, because, hell, they could have been a playoff team if they had Darnold for those 3 or 4 weeks. So it's a team that actually has some momentum heading into next year, but a lot of organizational dysfunction there still. So I don't know if they're going to be a whole lot higher in the preseason. We'll see. It all could play out. Number 23, the Oakland Raiders. A nice, cute little season here for the Raiders. They picked up some good wins early on, and the offense showed some nice things, and I think Gruden showed a lot as a head coach here. As outside of that, and outside of Darren Waller being a complete surprise, I think I kind of nailed this team. It was one of the worst defenses in the league. I thought their draft was the most overrated draft that I could ever remember. I thought they completely reached for Clelin Ferrell. I thought the drafting a box safety and a running back was pretty meaningless. Now, that safety didn't end up playing, but that rookie class has a lot to prove. Josh Jacobs is really good, but we all knew that. When you draft a running back in the first round, he better be as good as Josh Jacobs looked. So this Raiders team has a lot of work to do, I think, as they move to Las Vegas. They do have some momentum, but is it going to be with a new quarterback? Who knows? That could be interesting. I do think John Gruden is showing that he is the right guy for this team. Number 22, the Denver Broncos, hanging around about where we had them. Pretty much what I expected from this team, about a 7-9 season. Drew Lock probably going to be the starter next year, and that's going to be kind of the mission for next year, is making sure he's got the best talent to work with and maybe restoring this defense to a top level. They could be a wild card sleeper depending on how this offseason plays out. Number 21, the Arizona Cardinals. I had them at 25, which I think was higher than most people, just because I was so high on Kyler Murray, and I would say that thanks to him and Cliff Kingsbury looking like a really good quarterback-coach combination, this team put up a pretty solid season, better than even I would have expected. So big offseason ahead for the Arizona Cardinals to start beefing up this roster and go from a team that can kind of be a 4 or 5 win team that plays spoiler to an actual legitimate playoff team in a loaded NFC. Number 20, the LA Chargers, and I was actually surprisingly low on this team. I've been very high on the Chargers throughout the last few years or so, but pretty much everything went wrong for this team this year. The offensive line was just as bad as you had feared. Phillip Rivers showed some age regression, I think. You had injuries across the board. Just a rough year for the Chargers, who are kind of rudderless right now as they head towards the real football stadium in Los Angeles. And we don't know what's going to be, who's their quarterback is going to be next year. So that'll be a ride, I think. By the way, I counted 10 teams on this list that might be looking to change their quarterback situation next year, which makes this offseason a thriller. And it's a decently deep quarterback class as well. Number 19, the Indianapolis Colts. Couldn't have foreseen Andrew Luck retiring, so I'm not going to apologize for the minus 14 here. I would say that they were about as good as I would have expected, about a 6-7 win team without Andrew Luck. And Brissett looked about as good as I would have expected, about the 30th best quarterback in the league. To me, the Colts are a team, if maybe they bring in Phillip Rivers or something like that, they could very well get back into the playoff conversation next year. Just a shell shock season that they did a really good job to embrace this year. Number 18, the Tampa Bay Bucks. This one, probably my biggest whiff up to this point on this list. I didn't think they were very good at all. I thought this was going to be one of the worst defenses in the league. It wasn't a great defense, but they had some really good defensive performances throughout the year. Shaq Barrett, I loved that signing, but I had no idea, as did nobody, that he was going to be like a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. I like this young secondary as we move forward. Jameis in this offense was really clicking. Now, Jameis is what he is. If they bring him back, they're playing with fire. They're probably going to win 6 to 10 games with him, and you're just kind of rolling the dice that his bad mistakes don't stack up at the wrong times, basically. So I personally think they bring Jameis back just because he kind of fits Arians' style here with this offense. It's going to be an interesting team for next year. It's a team that I've floated the idea of buying into for next year. The offseason is going to say a lot about that. The Atlanta Falcons, right around where I ranked them, -1. Their record was probably worse than I would have expected. But, they just aren't the kind of team with the kind of quarterback, really, that can carry a team that deals with injuries. The defense completely fell apart. The young offensive linemen that they were really relying on if they were going to be a playoff team barely played this year on the right side of that line. Now, when they got those linemen in there, this looked like a much better football team. So I think it's a team that very well could bounce back next year. They got some work to do on the defensive side of the ball, and Dan Quinn has everything to prove next year. If that defense doesn't turn into a solid unit, he's gone. I thought he should have been gone this year, to be completely honest. But this offense is obviously very good, a team that could be a playoff team next year. Number 16, the Chicago Bears. I definitely floated the idea that they could be the equivalent of the 2018 Jacksonville Jaguars, but I did say that they were a better version of that team. Mitchell Trubisky, there was a lot of hype heading into this year. I thought he was a bottom 3 or 4 starter in the league that you couldn't rely on. That basically all played out. They dealt with some more injuries as well after having pretty much perfect health in 2018 for the most part. So all of the signs that were pointing towards pretty clear regression for a defensive-oriented team with a bad quarterback played out, and they ended up with an 8-8 season. So I may have ranked them a little bit too high, but for the most part, my analysis of the Bears was pretty close. Their focus for this offseason has got to be who's their quarterback going to be. There's a lot of veteran options. They don't have that first-round pick because of the Mack trade. But 500 season for the Bears. Number 15, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I feel pretty good about my where I stood on this team. I did have them winning the AFC North. Now, did completely whiff on the Baltimore Ravens and how good they were. But as far as what I thought about the Steelers, if Big Ben was in there, I think they were, probably a 10-11 win team. Their quarterback situation was an absolute disaster. Mason Rudolph was never going to be the answer there. So the defense is really good. I think Big Ben, who said recently that he's raring and ready to go for next year, get Juju in there healthy. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are one of those teams that could not just be like a sleeper playoff team, but a team that could actually have a Super Bowl type of season next year. depending on how healthy and fresh Big Ben is at his age. Number 14, the LA Rams. Was a disappointing season. They showed some life in there, but basically my narrative on them is that they were going to take a step back. They had some losses in free agency. Jared Goff, not the kind of quarterback that can carry this team. That offensive line was going to have a lot to say about how good their season was going to be, because they did have a lot of turnover on that offensive line, and it was basically a worst-case scenario. Not only did the guys they were hoping to step up disappoint, but Rob Havenstein, their right tackle, who was one of the best right tackles for a couple years, fell off the face of the planet and was one of the worst starting right tackles this year. So that, to me, is the biggest reason this team fell off of the cliff. Todd Gurley, like I had said, was not the factor that he's been over his career. So the Rams, a disappointing season, and as we've detailed many times, they've got a very rough future ahead of them just because their cap space is gone and they don't have any picks. So they're kind of screwed, in my opinion. McVay is going to have his hands full in the next few seasons. The Dallas Cowboys at number 13, right where we ranked them in the preseason. One of the weirdest seasons of a team I can remember. Their plus-minus was just off the charts. One of the more underperforming teams in the last decade. Jason Garrett will not be back. They don't even have to fire him because his contract's expired. This team, in my opinion, missed their window this year. I think this roster was absolutely loaded up and set to win this year. I think that's why they paid Zeke, knowing that this had to be the year. Because guess what? You're probably going to keep Dak. You're probably going to be able to pay Amari Cooper, is my guess. But good luck filling out the margins of that roster. And I like Dak, but I don't think he's the type of quarterback that can really elevate the play of those around him to an elite level. So to me, I think this Cowboys team will be okay next year, but I don't, at this moment, have very high expectations. Number 12, the Buffalo Bills. Really nice season for them. Basically everyone in the AFC East had really good records for the most part, better records than maybe they should have based on how good they were, because their schedules were so easy. But the Bills showed really good defense. That was never a question for me. The offense looked about like I would expect. I like Josh Allen, but I didn't expect this to be anything outside of a bottom 10 offense, and it really wasn't. Heading into the playoffs, I do think they're probably the worst team in the playoffs, personally, just because that offense is really bad, and they're going to have to go on the road where I just don't really trust them. I like that defense, but yeah, I feel like I'm talking bad about them. They had a great season. I like the future of this organization. I think Allen could get marginally better year by year, especially if they start to put some offensive talent around him that can actually help. Number 11, the Philadelphia Eagles. People are going to want me to apologize for ranking them number 1. I'm not going to do that. If you would have told me that they would have had the amount of injuries that they had, I obviously would not have ranked them number 1. It's been a pretty rough season. They've lost their entire receiving core. They've been just constantly rotating on the offensive line. Defensively, their big free agent signing, Malik Jackson, went out in the preseason. So it's been a real rough season for the Eagles, and they've still persevered. Had an 8-8 season, or a 9-7 season, managed to sneak into the playoffs, and I actually think they beat the Seahawks this weekend. So I'm not really going to apologize for ranking them number 1. They were not going to be the best team in the NFL this year. That much is very clear, but the fact that this team has persevered through all these injuries, I think, shows that there's still something there with Carson Wentz and the roster talent there. Number 10, the Tennessee Titans, one of the biggest risers on this list, and they clearly deserve it. Now, I'm not going to apologize for having them 21. A big reason I had that was I didn't believe in Marcus Mariota, and 2 weeks into the season, I made a video saying that it was time to move on from Marcus Mariota, and even then, Titans fans called me a hater and said I was wrong. So, as far as that's concerned, they were not going anywhere with Marcus Mariota. Now, could anyone have predicted that Ryan Tannehill was going to come in here and be significantly better and ignite this entire team? No, you're kidding yourselves if you truly believed that. So, anyway, good for this team to get that. You obviously got to bring Ryan Tannehill back next year after what he showed here. And this Titans team, I would fully expect to have a lot of hype next year based on how they played with Ryan Tannehill as their quarterback. Now, we'll see if they can make any noise in the playoffs. I think they do have a little berserker to them. So we'll see how that all plays out. But Titans fans, I don't think are complaining right now. It's been a fun season. Number 9, the Houston Texans. Going to climb up 9 spots here. Probably just had them a little low to begin with. I think they were helped a little bit by the Chargers falling off a cliff, the Andrew Luck retirement in their division, the Big Ben injury, some AFC teams definitely disappointing a lot more than the Texans. They've been about as good as I expected, but they're heading into the playoffs with a home game. It's going to come down to Deshaun Watson and what version of him you get. But yeah, they're going to come in at number 9. Minnesota Vikings at number 8. They've been about what I expected. This offseason's probably going to be pretty boring for this team. I think you got one more year on that Kirk Cousins contract. You got a lot of veterans there hovering around the 30-year-old mark. I think they're probably just going to play this thing out one more season, and then maybe they go and blow everything up if it doesn't work out next year. Number 7, the Seattle Seahawks, climbing up 3 spots. There was a big split on this team. I think I came in a little higher on this team than people originally thought they should be. I just didn't fully buy the roster talent, but Russell Wilson is incredible, and that's basically how the season played out. They're kind of a team that has a lot of room to improve next year, and that's kind of scary for the NFC because they won a lot of games on the shoulders of Russell Wilson this year. Number 6, the New England Patriots, a disappointing season. I thought the playmakers here were going to be a lot better. It turned out to be one of the worst groups of just offensive weapons in the entire league. And dealt with some injuries on that offensive line as well that definitely didn't help. For the most part, though, the defense was about as good as you would think. And Tom Brady, I was already previewing him as a worse version of Tom Brady. I think he was about as good as I expected this year. So the Patriots still a top 6 team. I don't know if they're going to make a lot of noise in the playoffs, though. Number 5, the Green Bay Packers. Caught a lot of flack for this one. Thought the defense would be much improved. Thought that you can never count a team with Aaron Rodgers out. Now, Rodgers wasn't particularly great this year, but he didn't have to do a whole lot. I will say that 13-win season, they're probably not a 13-win football team, but all in all, we had them ranked pretty high. They had an outstanding season. They got a tough road ahead of them. They do get a bye in the playoffs, but they're going to have to most likely go through the Saints and the 49ers, which is going to be really tough for this team. Number 4, the Kansas City Chiefs, where we ranked them to start the year. Ironically, I was actually lower on the Chiefs heading into the year. I thought the Patrick Mahomes hype was a little too off the rails after the big season he had. But now I'm happy to say that I'm actually high on the Chiefs. I think Mahomes is absolutely incredible. I think people have forgotten about that. And for the most part, this team's season has kind of played out how I perceived it. Number 3, the New Orleans Saints. They're staying here at number 3. That loaded roster definitely served them well this year. They continue to win without Drew Brees. They get Drew Brees back, and he's looking awesome. The defense has only gotten better over the years, so I love this Saints team. I think if they had the 1 or even the 2 seed, maybe they would have been my pick to win the Super Bowl. They are neck and neck to me with the Niners, who I do put at number 2. So they're going to climb up 12 spots here. That 14 ranking I had them was probably about as high as you would have seen out there. I was very high on this Niners team. Called them in my deep dive over the summer. The best bet to win the Super Bowl. I thought back last January they were a total sleeper team. So despite the plus 12 here, I am absolutely not going to apologize for this a big amount of movement. I thought very highly of this Niners team, and everything played out to that. Number 1, the Baltimore Ravens. This is probably the biggest miss of any team, any take I've ever had on this channel. Probably even worse than the Baker Mayfield take that in year 2 here is actually looking like it might have been a little better. But this Ravens team just blew my expectations out of the water. It wasn't just Lamar Jackson, who completely proved me wrong. I thought he was going to be like every other inaccurate quarterback that we've ever watched in the NFL and continue to struggle with accuracy. Well, he completely reworked his game and has just been ridiculous. He's the MVP of the league, and I will definitely apologize for not necessarily believing in Lamar Jackson this year. But it goes well beyond that. The defense was significantly better than I thought. I didn't think it was going to stink because they are the Baltimore Ravens, and Harbaugh always finds ways to produce good defenses. But they came out and were a really dominant defense in the second half of the season. The offensive line was way better than I thought. Mark Andrews emerged as one of the top playmakers in the league. And Lamar Jackson's accuracy ended up being the perfect match with Marquise Brown as a vertical threat. So probably the worst take I've ever had on this channel, and I will apologize for it, but hey, they're sitting here number one. I am happy to admit when I'm wrong like that. So good for the Ravens. Good luck in the playoffs to all you guys who are fans of playoff teams. This was a fun power rankings. Not going to do it like this every week where I'm just constantly saying where I'm right, where I was wrong. I know that can be annoying, so I appreciate you sticking with me. Cheers as always, and we'll see you for the podcast. I think tomorrow I'm going to record the podcast, talk about some more of the stuff we broke down today. So cheers as always, guys. We'll see you later.